Have you ever had a situation where someone asked you to tell them about a sermon that you or someone else preached, and you found it extremely challenging to summarize the essence in one sentence? Well, in this video today, we will take a look at that. Every preacher must so prepare that the hearers will have that one sentence that can explain the essence of the sermon. That sentence illuminating the main idea, that sentence revealing the main focus, that singular thread that runs through the sermon, that unique hub that everything revolves around. Knowing this statement and preaching so that your listeners also can get it may be the most crucial component for a sermon's development, direction, and outcome. Well, preaching professor Dr. Haddon Robinson likes to say, a sermon must be a bullet and not a buckshot. In other words, the sermon should focus on one clear, simple, concise main idea. If you were writing an academic paper, you would call this the thesis statement. And Robinson calls this sermonic main idea. He calls this the big idea. Every sermon should have a big idea. Every sermon should have that main point. Now, if you don't have a main point, then what is the point if there's no point? The great preacher and theologian Dr. Samuel D. Proctor calls this the proposition. And he suggests that the preparation of the sermon must wait until the proposition has reached for or grasped the preacher. And we're going to talk about that. Methodist preacher Brian Chappell, he says that the main idea must pass what is called the 3 a.m. test. And he suggests that if someone calls you at 3 a.m., and that person asks you the question, what is your sermon about? And you are not able to answer in one concise, crisp statement, the sermon is really not ready to preach. The big idea should be easy to explain in one sentence. That is very, very important. Now, I hear you asking the question, then how do I discover the big idea, the proposition, the main idea? How do I prevent myself from failing that 3 a.m. test? Well, I want to suggest 7 steps today for you to utilize to discover the big idea of the sermon. Step number 1, find the text or the story from which you're going to be preaching. And finding or selecting that focus text or narrative is a process led by the Holy Spirit. It is very, very important that you understand that this process, finding the text, has a whole lot compact in it by itself. And so I will do a separate video on this, so look out for that when I deal with how to find the text or the narrative. Step number 2, set the boundary for your study. Limit the text or the story to a paragraph or a unit of thought. Now, when you are doing an academic paper, this is called the scope or the delimitation of the study, and that's if you're doing an academic research study. Now, for the purpose of preaching and for the purpose of preparation, what you need to do is go through the passage and decide where a particular thought begins or where it ends. In other words, you need to figure out where the author changes the subject. And when you do this, you will be able to limit yourself to a particular segment of the text or a story. Step number 3, saturate yourself in the text. Study the text from different translations or versions. Visualize yourself in the text, or let the text play itself out in your mind. Tell the story to yourself in different ways. Backtrack the story. Now, you may ask me, what is that? But I'd suggest that when you backtrack the story, you do not start from the beginning of the story to the end, but you rather start at the end of the story and work your way back to the beginning. This is a process that is very helpful, because if you're able to tell the story from the end to the beginning, then you know that you have that story very clear in your mind and you're saturated. Now, if you are not able to do that, I guarantee you that you're not as saturated as you can be. So start practicing telling the story to yourself, or reading that text in your mind from the end to the beginning rather than the beginning to the end. Start that practice and let me know how it goes for you. Step number 4, make an outline of the text. Now, this outline is not the sermonic outline. It's not the outline for your sermon. This is just outlining the text. It's charting the text. It's just making rough notes about the text. This will help you to identify the main characters or the main characteristics of the text or story. It will also help you identify the supporting characteristics or the supporting characters in the text or in the story. Now, when you make an outline or when you chart the text, this helps to determine a few things. It will help you to determine what terms you need to define. It will help you to determine what conditions you need to address in the text or in the story. It will also help you to determine the scope, the geographical scope, the information that you will need to get so that you can paint the setting correctly. It will also help you to determine what words you should study in the original language. So I suggest that you make an outline, because this will be very helpful for you. Step number 5, clarify the broad significance of the text. And what do I mean? You need to clarify, after reading it over, after saturating yourself, you need to clarify, what is that single overriding idea? What is that unit of thought being pulled together by? There must be a particular thought that gives meaning to all the details that are in the text. You will be able to do this by asking a few questions. Now, here are some questions I suggest that you ask of the text. What is the author talking about? That's question number 1. But then you need to also ask, what is the author saying about what he or she is talking about? Now, it is here that you also ask some other questions, like who or what is involved? What is it that happened in the text or in the story? What is it that will happen? How did it happen? Notice that this is basically reviewing the text. This is going over the text. This is not the time when you are ready to make applications. I know some preachers are quick to run to making applications, but this point, no, you're not ready for applications just yet. All that you're doing at this point is addressing the issues of the text or the story as they took place in the ancient Bible world. So you're pausing from everything else. You're shutting everything else out. And so what you're doing is analyzing that text for that main theme that runs through the text. Now, step number 6 is writing the homiletical idea, that big idea, that proposition. And what you want to do is you want to summarize this in one sentence that is clear, and it brings across the message that is in the text, that message that the author is trying to give. Now, here are a few things for you to remember when you write this main idea or this big idea or this proposition. First, you need to ensure that this is a statement of fact. This is what is in the text. This is what it's really saying. Now, secondly, it should be short and it should be memorable. It should be that one thing that every person listening to you can say came out of the sermon. It also should be devoid of any second idea. You do not want to introduce a second idea in this main idea that you are presenting. So while you may not be able to get away from all conjunctions, ands, or ifs, minimize the use of conjunctions. Step number 7, Review the story alongside that big idea or that propositional statement that you just wrote. You need to reread the story and reread your statement so that they are in full alignment. The last thing you want to do is to have a statement and a story that are not in sync. You do not want to get far from the text in your statement, that your statement does not synchronize with what you have found in the text or what someone else is seeing in the text, because that will throw the entire sermon off. You want to make sure your statement is in alignment with the story or with the text. You want to make sure that what you're writing as your main idea is really in the text. Now, I hear you saying, this is so tedious and this is so tiresome. But trust me when I tell you that if you practice this, it will be helpful to enhancing your sermon. Furthermore, with discipline, with practice, and with repetition, this becomes so much easier. I tell you, I have been doing this for many years. I continue to do it, and it has been helpful to me. I also want for you to know this. The process of preparation can be more straightforward for some people than it is for others. So my encouragement to you is, don't judge yourself based on others. Be yourself and know what you need to do in order to grow. I hope these 7 steps will help you to enhance your sermon and to help you to grow and enjoy the preparation process. Let me know what you think. Drop me a note in the comment section and give me some feedback on what you have heard in this presentation. I'll be more than delighted. And if you have some other tips, hey, why not? Let me get them also, because I want to learn from you as you are learning from me.